Tras esta noticia, damos ya la bienvenida a nuestro invitado internacional, como todos los jueves, Jay Kaeppel, Senior Research Analyst at sentimenttrader.com. How are you, Jay? Thank you for coming again.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me back.
Well, Jay, you've been a great enthusiast about the stock market. You told us during the last weeks that the signals were quite bullish for the stock market, and we are seeing this movement in the stock. What do you think right now? We approach the summer. Do you think we should, as they say, sell in May and go away, but it's not working this year, right?
So far, the market's been doing very well in June. I think the rally is still intact. The trend is clearly bullish. On a shorter-term basis, this week, one of the things I'm looking at is we call it the summer rally period. And the first chart that I have, basically that period here in the U.S. encompasses the last 3 trading days of June, plus the first 9 trading days of July. So it's 12 days. And what the chart shows is, if we go back to 1940, if you invested in the S&P 500 index only during those 12 days every year since then, the cumulative gain is about 200%. And basically 75% of the years that period showed a gain. What's interesting is if you invested in all of the other days during June, July, and August, you would actually have lost 3%, even including the rally so far in June, which really surprises people. But I think it says 2 things. Number one, for short-term traders, especially right now, because we're entering that period today, the summer rally period, you want to be looking for opportunities to play the long side of the market. You want to keep going with the trend. For longer-term investors, I think what it says is it's a reminder that you need to be patient sometimes during the summer, because a lot of times the market can go sideways to nowhere during those months. So that's what I'm seeing right now.
Very interesting, Jay. So we should be invested during the first days of July, and then be careful at the 10th day of July, right?
That's the history. You know, in any given year, you don't know for sure how it's going to play out. But
very interesting.
Like I said, for longer-term investors, a little patience may be in order in the months ahead.
Very interesting, Jay. And also, we have another chart that tracks the EWP, that it's the MSCI Spain index, and you are seeing something interesting, right, for this period?
Yeah, this is really for super short-term traders. A strange quirk for the ticker EWP. Trading days of the year 124 and 125, which actually this year works out to Friday, June 30th, and Monday, July 3rd. That 2-day period, if we track it back to when this ETF started trading in 1996, 81% of the time that period has showed a gain. In fact, 17 of the last 19 years, that 2-day period has showed a gain. And what's interesting to me, and really shows the upside bias, is if we look at moves of 1% or more, either a gain or a loss of 1%, 14 times there's been a gain, a 2-day gain of more than 1%. Only twice has there been a loss of more than 1%. So again, for super short-term traders, you know, you never know from year to year how it's going to go, but there's definitely an upside bias in the next few days.
Very interesting also to keep an eye on the Spain index. And also, Jay, can we talk about the fixed income market? Because we talk a lot about the last weeks. We talk about some signals about this fixed income market. What do you think right now? Yields are going to stay higher for longer?
Well, I tend to follow the bond market on a trend-following basis. And the reason for that is because interest rates, if you look at the history, they move in very long-term waves, like 30 years at a time, 30 years up, 30 years down. So if you can just get the trend, you can ride it a long way. The third chart that I have is ticker TYX, which tracks the yield or the interest rate on a 30-year U.S. Treasury bond. And for some reason, they multiply it by 10. So a value of 40 equates to a 4% yield on a 30-year bond. And if you look at that chart, back in the 1970s, we see it started going up, and the red line is essentially the 10-year moving average. So as I said, it's a very long-term indicator. But it got above there, and interest rates kept going for about 10 years, reaching 15% before they topped out. Then in about the mid-'80s, it came down and dropped below the long-term moving average. And remember, declining interest rates are good for bonds. So with that decline over the last 35 years, that really kept investors on the right side, the bullish side of the bond market. And then we see what happened in the last few years. It started to turn around, and now the interest rate is back above that long-term moving average. There's no prediction built into this. I keep reading that interest rates are due to come back down, and those predictions may turn out to be true. But as a trend follower, as long as that index is above the 10-year moving average, what it tells me is I want to avoid the long-term bonds, because those are the most susceptible to interest rate movement. So if rates keep going up, they'll get hurt the most. So if I'm going to be in the bond market, I want to be on the shorter duration end of the market.
Very interesting, Jay, about this duration concept. And finally, talking also about gold, we are seeing a pretty correction during the last days. Gold it's forming a cup with handle pattern, but it could also be a triple top, right?
Yeah, so I'm a numbers guy. I'm not so much of a chart reader, and part of that is because I think that a lot of people see whatever they want to see in a chart, and there's an example of that right now in the gold market. There's kind of dueling chart patterns. So on that fourth chart, the green lines are essentially what is referred to as a cup with handle formation, and historically when that forms and then price breaks out above that little handle that you see on the right-hand side, the downsloping channel, very often, typically, that's followed by an extraordinary rally. Well, gold tried to do that. It broke out back in 1970, and it couldn't get through, and then it came back down and went up again and up again. And so now we have another chart pattern, the red line, which is essentially a triple top. And historically, when a market or a security hits the same price 3 times in a row and can't get through, it tends to fall, and sometimes it falls hard. So everybody wants to know, everybody wants to predict, well, which way is this going to go? And nobody can predict. The only thing you can do is decide how you're going to trade it. So just as an example, my approach at the moment, I'm not in the gold market, but I'm following it closely. If gold can break out above that red line, which is essentially $2,072 an ounce, is sort of the quote-unquote magic number, if it can break out above that number, then I will be extremely bullish on gold, and I think it could go a long way. And I think the thing to keep watching in the meantime is the rate of inflation. Right now, it's trending lower and lower month after month. If that turns around and starts to tick higher, and all of a sudden gold is able to break out above that 2072, then I think we're in a position to have a huge rally in the gold market. Until then, me personally, I'm just biding my time.
Jay, as always, we'll keep an eye on that resistance, on that level for entry point in gold, if that's the case. Thank you very much. As always, I'm pleased to recommend sentimenttrader.com to check all this information. Jay Kaeppel, Senior Research Analyst. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bueno, pues como nos decía Jay Kaeppel, vamos a hacer un resumen muy rápido de todos los gráficos que nos ha traído en el día de hoy desde sentimenttrader.com. El primer gráfico nos muestra cómo se comporta el SP500 o la estrategia de comprar el SP500 en los 3 últimos días de junio y los 9 primeros días de julio comparado con el resto de días de junio, julio y agosto. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Que cuando compramos los últimos 3 días de junio y los 9 primeros de julio, el retorno, como pueden ver, es el de arriba, es el de la línea que da un retorno de más del 200% acumulado en todos los años. Si estamos en el resto de días del verano, normalmente el verano suele ser una estacionalidad que no suele ser muy favorable para las bolsas, hay poca liquidez, no se mueve mucho, como ven sería la línea de abajo el retorno acumulado. Así que dice que normalmente los días más alcistas en el verano, 3 últimos días de junio, como estamos viendo hoy, hoy sería uno de esos 3 días, y los 9 primeros días de julio. Si miramos el segundo gráfico, nos habla sobre todo del índice MSCI España. Nos dice que durante los días del 30 al 3 de julio, 30 de junio al 3 de julio, suele ser también bastante alcista, así que se podría vigilar de forma estacional, por supuesto, datos estadísticos y estacionales. Podríamos vigilar este ETF, que sería el ticker EWP, para el que le interese. En el tercer gráfico nos habla de los tipos de interés, y cuando preguntamos si los tipos de interés se tienen que dar más tiempo, más altos durante más tiempo, nos muestra este gráfico y nos dice normalmente las tendencias suelen darse en periodos de meses muy prolongados, y como pueden ver ya ha habido un cambio de tendencia secular y ahora podríamos ver una tendencia de tipos de interés altos durante mucho más tiempo. Por último, en el cuarto gráfico le preguntamos sobre el oro. Nos estuvo diciendo hace unas cuantas semanas que el oro estaba formando un patrón que se denomina un patrón de cup and handle o de taza en español, que es esa forma tan habitual de hacer una U y luego formar un handle antes de romper el máximo. Todavía ese patrón no se ha confirmado porque todavía no ha habido rotura de máximo. Nos dice Jay Kaeppel que estemos vigilando, que si esa rotura se da, a partir de ahí podemos tener un punto de entrada, que mientras no se dé, posiblemente podría estar formando un triple techo y eso tampoco sería positivo para el precio del oro. Así que en un momento clave para determinar si estamos ante un triple techo o ante un cup and handle. Esperemos la rotura de máximos. Si se da, daría un punto de entrada. Si no se da, pues simplemente no hay riesgo. Esto ha sido el análisis de Jay Kaeppel de sentimenttrader.com. Y nosotros nos trasladamos ahora mismo al Consejo de Seguridad de la ONU, donde están